Mike Morris actually had my partner, Zach Leacox, stand up. And he's like, listen, I'm going to call you out on your ego right now in front of everyone. And he says, who's the best trial lawyer at your firm? And Zach and I both looked at it, and Zach goes, well, I'm the best. And I go, well, I'm the best. And Mike goes, that's bull. He said, you guys think you're the best because of your ego. You could go out and hire someone that's better than you to be the trial lawyer at your firm so you guys could focus on the business and growing this and scaling it.
That's Nick Norden, owner of Norden Leacox Accident and Injury Law. He recalls how one person called out his ego and forced him to hire better, and how that moment unlocked scale for his firm.
Early on, there was an individual that was not the right person, and we should have terminated this individual. And because they were so good at their job, we didn't. And it caused chaos within the firm. And nobody wanted to work with this person. Other people weren't happy. We had other people leave because they couldn't work with this person. And finally, when we had the difficult conversation, we terminated that person. It changed the whole atmosphere of our entire firm. And it was night and day. I can't even begin to describe the change. We had people that had left that called and wanted to come back.
For Nick, ego keeps trial lawyers from scaling. That choice unlocked the firm's culture shift. In this episode, you'll learn why one toxic employee caused staff to quit, how hiring and firing strictly on core values prevents that mistake, and why dashboards tracking acquisition costs beat lawyer paralysis by analysis. I'm Jason Lazarus, and this is Trial Lawyer Review. Nick, welcome to Trial Lawyer Review, and thank you for being with me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Excited to have this conversation today with you. You spent the first part of your career, like I did, representing insurance companies and corporate defendants before switching over to the plaintiff side. What was the precise moment that you figured out you were on the wrong side of the V? And what did the change cost you in the short term, do you think?
I remember I was defending a case, some very, very serious injuries to some college students. One of them was going to be a college athlete, and unfortunately, because of the injuries to his legs, never got to experience that. And being on the defense side, my job was to limit the damages. There was no question of liability, but it was get the case resolved for as little as possible. And I felt this person had very significant injuries, but to do my job, we negotiated a settlement, and it left me feeling empty. There was no, you don't feel like you win anything. I felt like the kids didn't get what they truly deserved. And I didn't like that feeling. I didn't enjoy it. And to top it all off, we get done with that and we're leaving mediation, and the adjuster's not so much as a, hey, good job, great job. You saved us a lot of money. It's just, hey, what about this other case you're working on? Tell me about that. And so I said, you know what? That's not what I want to feel when I go home at the end of the day. I wanted to feel more fulfilled. And so I started looking to switch sides at that point. I guess, what did it cost me? Having done the defense side.
Salary.
Yeah. Having done the defense side, you're on a nice salary. I left the firm in October. So my Christmas bonus was coming up in December, and with the billable hours I had done, I had earned a pretty nice holiday bonus. But, a good friend of mine that was talking to me about it said, hey, you know what? You'll make that up tenfold in the long haul. So I, left. And as you know, on the plaintiff side, it's eat what you kill. So there's not a salary. So, it took a few months to work hard and get back to what I was used to living off of, but it was 100% worth it.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I went through almost exactly the same thing. Of course, I took this alternative career path, which is sort of a hybrid. I still have a law practice, so I still, get my fill of that. But, it was an interesting experience, and I felt very similar to you. Just, I always felt like I was part of the problem, not part of the solution, representing insurance companies. And I did med mal, defense, and workers' comp. And it just, I think you really have to become a bit jaded to do that for the long term too. It's funny because one of my close buddies from law school who just recently switched, and he's been a med mal defense lawyer since he got out of law school. We were at the same firm together, actually starting out. just switched to the plaintiff side. It's crazy to me that I was like, what took you this long to decide that now is the time to do it? Anyway, just interesting to see how everybody's paths, ultimately lead them to whatever V they feel most comfortable on the side of,
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And welcome to your friend to the good side.
I know. Yeah. I was like, yes, finally, you saw the light. Before founding your firm, Norden Leacox, you were already lead trial counsel for another national personal injury firm. From doing my research, I'm curious, that's again another, I don't know, more safe position to be in. What pushed you into wanting to start your own firm and a law firm ownership instead of being just a trial lawyer with another firm?
So it's definitely not one thing. It was kind of a multitude of factors. A big one being my wife. She, pushed me to want to do something on my own. At the time, I was doing a lot of traveling. We had 2 young kids. I was trying cases out in New Mexico and Colorado, and I'd be gone for weeks at a time. She said, if you start your own firm here in Florida, you don't have to travel as much. So that kind of piqued my interest. But also the fact that I remember flying out for one of those cases where someone else had been handling the case, and I showed up Thursday evening, met the client on Friday, and then started picking a jury on Monday. And going into a case like that where I truly didn't know the plaintiff. It wasn't my case. I hadn't worked it out. I hadn't lived the case. And it's hard to go in there and tell their story of what they've experienced, the things they've lost, how these injuries have changed their lives when you really don't know them. And so I started thinking I could do things differently. I could, build a firm where we had less attorneys, the number of cases the attorney had, and we get to know all of our clients very well, get to know what they're experiencing on a day-to-day, and be able to better tell that story to a jury.
Yeah, it's tough walking into a case if you don't really know, to be able to relate to the jury exactly what that person's gone through. I mean, having been through my own personal injury case, I know that all too well. And it's so important to be able to communicate that to the jury or, in mediation to the adjuster to get them to understand why they need to actually pay the policy. So that makes a lot of sense. That sort of thing becomes very difficult to manage if you're at someone else's mercy, right? You're not handling your own stuff. You're working on cases that someone else has worked up.
Exactly. Yep.
A lot of trial lawyers build their reputation, the firm's reputation in the courtroom. Yeah, I know as a managing partner, that can be a little bit different in terms of your work and what you're doing day to day. Where did you most underestimate the gap between being a great trial lawyer, what you were doing before, and then transitioning and having to run a great firm?
I think the biggest thing was understanding how much time I would truly have to put into the business side of things. I think when we were small and we were just starting off, and it was me and Zach and a paralegal and a receptionist, I was still able to kind of do everything and handle the day-to-day trial work as well. And as you get more and more employees and more direct reports, and you're helping them with their issues and what's going on, it eventually becomes, too much. And you have to really decide, okay, am I going to bring someone in to run the business side of things? Or am I going to, bring someone in that's a great trial lawyer and can step in and handle a lot of the trials or a lot of the casework that I was doing? And so that was a difficult thing to assess. And even this, at this time I go back and forth because there's time, I love being a trial lawyer. There's times when I want to jump in and do more trial work and do stuff. And then there's other times where I feel I need to be doing more of the business side of things.
Do you think that is one of the keys if a law firm owner is thinking about how do I grow and scale, meaning recognizing that, hey, I may be great at being a trial lawyer, but I'm not great at running a law firm, or vice versa, because without the right people in the right seats around you, any business, because I've experienced this within our own company at Synergy, you have to have the right people in the right seats looking at the right things in order to be successful as a business. And law firms, even though I think traditionally have operated differently, really are no different, because it is a business. You have to make money. You have to operate efficiently and profitably to be able to do the right things for your clients. So I'm curious about how you, if you were outside of a law firm today, would advise someone that's in that position that you were in and trying to figure out how do I structure everything to make sure I'm positioned for success?
That's a great question. I can tell you, I think, being a trial lawyer, you're competitive. We all have egos. And that's probably the biggest thing that gets in the way. We're a member of Fireproof, and we do both their coaching and their masterminds. And, I can remember being at one of their conferences, and at the end of the conference, everyone kind of stands up and says, okay, what's changed? What are you going to go and implement? What is the one thing that you're going to go back and change? And Mike Morris actually had my partner, Zach Leacox, stand up. And he's like, listen, I'm going to call you out on your ego right now in front of everyone. And he says, who's the best trial lawyer at your firm? And Zach and I both looked at it, and Zach goes, well, I'm the best. And I go, well, I'm the best. And Mike goes, that's bullshit. He said, you guys think you're the best because of your ego. You could go out and hire someone that's better than you to be the trial lawyer at your firm, so you guys could focus on the business and growing this and scaling it. Anyway, it was that push from Fireproof and Mike Morris to say, he's right. If we're going to scale it and get bigger and grow, we can't let our ego get in the way. We have to go out and find someone or a group of lawyers that care as much as we do, that may be better at some things than we are, and let them do it so that we can grow the firm and provide the absolute best representation for our clients.
Well, I've had Mike on the podcast and Perry Schneider as well, and talked through with them their framework, and have read the book, and kind of understand how he took EOS, which is what I had brought to Synergy years and years ago to help us create a framework to operate from. And having talked to Mike about these operating systems and installing that, and how he took it and kind of morphed it into something that worked well in the personal injury space, that framework and thinking through, again, how the business operates, who's in the seats that need to be filled, what are the metrics that have to be measured for you to be successful, all of those things. And then having coaches and teams around you that can help you succeed through the mastermind. It really surprises me how few firms and leaders were really leveraging that fully. I think it's starting to change. It seems like, particularly with AI and shifts in terms of the marketplace with this, now prevalence of MSOs and some of the ABS stuff, how it seems to be driving more thought process around how do we operate a law firm most efficiently and profitably. But it starts to me with those systems and having support around you to help you build that.
100%. I think the biggest thing is you don't know what you don't know until you have someone from the outside to tell you, hey guys, here's a problem that you have, or here's something, let's look at it a different way. Mike and his firm and their coaching have been great with, they're an open book. They don't mind sharing. And you get to learn, from mistakes that, they made. Same thing with the masterminds. That's a great thing about talking to other law firm owners, is you see what they do well, what they've made mistakes on, and hopefully you can avoid those mistakes and, replicate the success they've had.
We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but let me ask you this. What if your firm could scale without adding operational drag? As case volume grows, lien resolution and compliance can quietly slow everything down. Synergy works alongside personal injury firms as an operations partner, managing these processes so teams stay focused on clients, strategy, and outcomes, not administrative details. If you want to understand how firms are handling this at scale, click the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen to learn more. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Such a beautiful thing to have that example and have that outside, knowledge base. Because even when we bring in someone who's not familiar with our industry, we learn stuff because they look at it from a different perspective than we do when we're, mired in the day to day and the nuance of our industry. But really, when you boil it all down, all businesses need to operate similarly in terms of just the frameworks, the basic frameworks.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm sure you probably, like most law firm owners, would describe the first couple of years of running a firm as relentlessly lonely at the top. I know, when I started Synergy and didn't have a lot around me, that was not easy. I'm curious for you, coming from different firms, what that looked like for you and what you did to ultimately get the right perspectives to help you on your journey. I mean, I know you talked about Fireproof, but I'm not sure that was probably around from day one.
So it was not around from day one. I would say I probably have a very unique experience compared to a lot of firm owners, or for that matter, CEOs of companies, leaders in their business, because Zach and I have known each other for so long. We've known each other for 20 years now. He was at my wedding. He went with me to my first deposition, my first mediation, my first trial. While I have a business background, as a finance degree, he has an MBA. And so, a lot of people, in the position that when you're starting a firm and running a firm, talk about they have no one to talk to. Nobody understands because they have employees, but it's a different experience. And I noticed that early on, where as the firm grew, I got further and further separated from the employees. I wasn't, just one of them anymore. But I've had Zach the entire time as a sounding board. And so when there are things going on, Zach and I have discussions and we work through things and we figure out the best solution. And he and I, while we have a lot of similarities, I think we also, some of our strengths are very different. So there are things that maybe I'm not good at that he is great at. And then, there's some other things that I'm sure I'm a little bit better than him at. And so we kind of balance each other out. But when, he's not only my partner, who it's like a marriage. I completely trust him with everything, running our lives together. But he's also one of my best friends, and our families get along well together. Our kids play together. We go on vacations together. We spend holidays together. So that, for me, has made it less lonely than I know a lot of people go through, because, at night when you have a new worry or a new concern and you're trying to fix the problem, I'll reach out to Zach at 10:30 at night and we'll have a discussion about it and have a conversation, rather than I'm at home alone trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have people around you like that give you that. And when you don't have that, that's where things like, a Fireproof or a mastermind group can be incredibly invaluable. I know I leveraged that because I didn't have as much around me. I mean, I had partners, but we still, the outside perspective or different perspectives is such a critical thing. And I wanted to ask you about your background, your business background, having a finance degree on top of your JD, and also Zach having the MBA. How does that business background show up in the way you guys make decisions about the firm in ways your peers might be missing because they don't have that? Because, in law school, and I regret not doing the dual JD MBA track that was available to me at the time. And I didn't really think anything of it at that time. But, there is no training around business in law school. And so unless you did your undergraduate work in one of those areas, you don't really have any of that formalized training. I got it on the fly, on the job, and then did some, education at Rollins. They had a mini MBA program that was, not quite an MBA, but, give you some of the basics and stuff like that. But I'm just curious, how you think that background helped you guys, and what PI lawyers in firms that don't have that training may be missing.
I think it was a huge advantage for us. I think that a lot of people hang out their own shingle. They're great lawyers. They start practicing, and then they're trying to figure out the business side of it, and they really don't go into it with a plan. Zach and I, sat down for a few months before we opened the firm. We wrote out a whole business plan. We wrote out a whole budget. We had our marketing, plan put together. We spent hours and, hundreds of hours meeting to go over everything before we were, ready to move forward. And that's all because of the business background that we had. And so, that got us off to a great start. I think it was extremely useful. I think it's, we've ran the firm as a business from day one, which I don't think all lawyers do initially. I think they're doing the practice of law, and then they have to figure out, well, wait a second, this is a business. I have to run it like a business. And I guess the other thing is I feel like in business, you learn sometimes it's about getting 80% of the information and making a decision. It doesn't always have to be the right decision. It has to be a decision, and then you can, pivot if you need to, or adjust or change it. I think, a lot of my friends that are lawyers that don't have that business background, a lot of times they fall into paralysis by analysis, and they want to know every single thing before they make a decision. And then sometimes, it's too late. They've missed the opportunity, or they've fallen into what the decision's made for them. And I think when you're running a business, one of the most important things is being able to gather, the limited information you need to make a decision. And I really think that our business backgrounds kind of prepared us for that.
Well, good segue into the question that I was going to ask you next, which is when you sit down to make a real business strategic call about the firm, rather than, some of the minutia around case work or caseloads and that sort of thing, what framework do you use? Can you walk me through how you would think about something like that maybe differs from the way other lawyers might go about it?
Whenever we have a big decision to make, I never try to make an emotional decision. I try to step back and say, okay, what is this going to do for the long-term benefit of the firm, as opposed to it may be the best decision right now, but that's just a short-term decision. So we got to look at the long-term. How's it going to affect us, financially, this year, next year, 5 years down the road? How's it going to affect our personnel this year, next year? Being able to recruit people in the future. There may be times where we need to make a decision where maybe we're not going to make as much profit this year by doing something, but it's going to make future employees want to come work for us 3 years down the road. And so it's going to make us that much more profitable and desirable. I think it's really when we look at things, we have that mindset of let's look at what our long-term goals, because when we did that business plan, we sat out a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year, a 10-year plan. And what's going to get us to that 10-year plan? What do we need to do? There are times we're going to have to take a step back this year, this month, this week, to take 3 steps forward in a month or two. And I think that's something that we're very good at. I'm not going to say we do it correct all the time, because nobody does that. You make mistakes. But we are very much looking at the big picture, we let that guide our decisions.
Well, so there is a category of hard decisions around structure, people, workloads that oftentimes law firm leaders delay too long. Is there one decision that you feel like you guys waited too long to make? And, if so, what did that cost you in terms of dollars or whatever it might be that the actual cost was to you?
I'd say the hardest part of any business, but definitely what we found out is the employees. What I mean, I love my employees, but you do love your employees. And so it is hard when you find someone that deep down in your gut is not a right fit for your firm. And you like them as a person, they may be good at certain aspects of their job, but they're not the right person for your firm. And we, it was, early on, there was an individual that was not the right person. And we should have terminated this individual. And because they were so good at their job, we didn't. And it caused chaos within the firm. Nobody wanted to work with this person. Other people weren't happy. They were, we had other people leave because they couldn't work with this person. And finally, when we had the difficult conversation, we terminated that person. It changed the whole atmosphere of our entire firm. And suddenly, and it was night and day. And I can't even begin to describe the change. We had people that had left that called and wanted to come back, but we didn't know because this person was a high producer. They were a hard worker. They were just a negative impact. And so, the biggest thing that has led us to do is we hire, we fire, we train on our core values now. And if someone does not meet those core values, I don't care if they are the best at their job, they're not the right person for our firm. And now we don't wait. You make that decision and move on.
Such an important point. We absolutely screen first on our corporate values before fit in terms of their skill sets and their, whether you use predictive index or DISC or some other, mechanism that evaluates fit for their actual role. But if they don't fit culturally, it can become such a nightmare for everyone else on the team. Exactly what you just described, and the cost to a business of having what amounts to a cancer, even if they are a high performer, it just simply is not worth it. So that idea around, one, two is, we have this mantra, we don't always do it well, but hire slowly and fire quickly, because, if somebody's not a good fit, you just cannot allow that to persist, because everyone around is looking and watching what you are doing on your team. And like you said, we love our team, but there are people that, hopefully self-select out very quickly, or, we have to do the right thing for the rest of the team and say, this is a hard decision, but we're going to make it because it's the right answer for the organization.
100%. And I think you gain the respect of your employees when you do that, because, then they know that you're going to hold people accountable to your core values. And that's what they want. They want to be respected, and they want to feel that you're there to not only take care of your clients, but take care of them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And with what you guys do, and, we're adjacent to it, this making sure the team understands their purpose and what you are trying to achieve for your clients, having everyone understand the importance of every task that's performed inside of the business that then produces the end result is also critical. And without the right culture and hiring practices, it's almost impossible to get that right.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm curious, you're a ways into this journey, and what is one thing that you think you guys got right early on that you would absolutely repeat if you had to start over again from scratch?
Yeah. Honestly, it's the fireproof, getting involved with the fireproof coaching. And, they hold us accountable, and then we hold, our employees accountable. But it was such a game changer of getting in there and creating organization, creating better training for our staff, and then learning which employees within the firm, we could rely on, that they were going to be part of our executive team, part of growing the firm, making it better. It's, I look back now and we probably started it in year 2, I think, maybe 3. I wish we had started it sooner. I would tell anyone that's starting their firm, get coaching. I think Fireproof is incredible and wonderful. If you're not going to use Fireproof, get coaching from someone. You need that outside person, helping you and holding you accountable and having discussions and organizing the team meetings. Because even now we can get off track a little bit, and our coach will be like, hey guys, let's get back on topic. Let's say, okay, we focus what we need to focus on. But it has been an absolute game changer in everything we did. The community's great. And with the other firms within there, we refer cases back and forth. And so any money that we've spent, we've gotten way more back in experience and referrals. And it's an incredible experience. I'd tell anyone to do it.
So if you could pick the top 3 things that you feel like have been a positive outcome or changes or things you've implemented from your experiences with Fireproof or the mastermind, what would those be?
Zach and I were pretty good with the numbers. They talk about you want to have dashboards and things like that, but putting together that dashboard, and I'm looking at that constantly, knowing my numbers, knowing what the case acquisition costs are, knowing how many leads we have, knowing the wanted leads, the conversion rate, all of those things with trying to grow your firm and where your marketing dollars are going. I'm aware of that every second of the day now because of them. Like John Nachhazel has said that is, so important. And that guy is an absolute genius with the way he does things. But I've learned so much from him about that. And then, taking the time to have meetings, having the executive team meeting, having your quarterly meetings where you sit down and you plan all your goals for that quarter, your annual meeting, you plan the goals for the year, you put it on paper, you say, this is what we want to achieve. Those things have been game changing for us because, again, it's not just Zach and I sitting down saying, this is what we want to accomplish. It's members of our executive team. And then we're setting those goals and giving them jobs that are all going towards achieving those and growing our firm. And everyone checks in on one another. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to, when you're in that meeting, it's a safe space. Someone can call me out, just because I'm the partner of the firm, I'm one of the owners. If I'm not doing what I need to do, someone else in that room can tell me, hey, Nick, you need to do this. You need to accomplish this. And that's great. And then we come out of that room and we're a unified front and we're moving forward with growing the firm. The third thing is the camaraderie with other like-minded, partners at firms. There's firms from all around the country that are going through the same things we are. They're in the same growth curve. They've, been around for 4, 5, 6 years. They're kind of at the same revenue level. And to be able to bounce ideas off them. We have a whole text group where if we have a question about something, we can shoot it out, or a vendor that we might want to use. You talked about AI and AI service. How are you utilizing this? What might be better? What are you guys doing in marketing? Being able to bounce those ideas off other firms that, we've all signed, NDAs. And so, it's just between them, and everyone in that group has the abundance mindset of, hey, there's plenty of work out there. There's plenty of cases. We're all going to do well. I'd love for everyone to grow and double their size in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's all do it together. And it's just great to have that, to be able to go and bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, I know, in growing our business, it has been absolutely an integral part of our success to be able to lean in on whether it's consultants or business groups. There's so many different ways to go about what you've described, but without that sounding board, you get caught up in the minutia of the day to day and you don't see the forest for the trees. And that's dangerous when you're running a business, particularly when you don't have your eye on the right metrics or you're not hiring right. And I mean, all the things we've already talked about. So it is such a key part of, if you're really looking to grow and scale, having that kind of framework is invaluable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What is a trap you've seen other trial lawyers walk into when they decide to leave a firm that they're practicing with and then open up their own shop based on, your experiences?
I'd say not being prepared. I feel like a lot of people, they see other people do it and they're like, oh, okay, I can go hang up my shingle, and they go out. And again, they may be a very good lawyer and they have a couple of cases, but they haven't come up with the plan of, how am I going to get more cases? And when I'm out there doing the networking and the marketing and telling people that I'm a good lawyer, who's going to be back in the office doing the work so that things are still moving, and that every time I'm out doing that, the office doesn't come to a standstill. And so, what I see from a lot of people and a lot of lawyers in general is, we're an industry where there's a lot of burnout. People are grinding. They're working, 15, 16, 18 hours a day, 6-7 days a week. And you just can't sustain that, over the course of a lifetime and be healthy and have a family and be psychologically sound. You just can't. And if you have the mentality of, well, I'm a very good, lawyer, and I'm a hard worker, and I'm just going to keep grinding it out. Eventually I just feel that you're going to burn out and realize, if you don't have the tools in place to scale, you're just going to be stuck at stuck where you're at, and you're never going to grow, or you're going to burn out and decide, maybe I need to do something else.
100%. So if you look ahead to the next 3 to 5 years for your firm, what is one shift you think you will have in terms of how you spend your time as someone that's managing the firm that is coming?
Yeah. I've already, we've started the shift. I've gotten further and further away from the day-to-day handling of cases. I'm much more now involved in growing the firm, the marketing aspects, much more involved in the people, and trying to lead them, and create that partnership with my employees to grow the firm, to see the vision as Zach and I have it, and do that. And so what I'm hopeful is that as that grows and we continue to grow, I can, Zach and I will get to the point where we'll bring someone in to kind of run the day-to-day more, to be more of the chief operating officer, more of that. And so my ultimate, what I would love to see is, I'm doing, some of the CEO type things, but I am able to get back into trying, those catastrophic cases and trying the big cases and being in the courtroom and helping clients, because for me, that's just something that does make me feel whole. And it makes me feel good inside to be able to truly help someone that's had a serious injury, it's no fault of their own. Their whole life's been turned upside down, and to really go help them obtain justice. But that's the goal, to get back there to doing a lot more of that, and less of the day-to-day operations of the firm.
But you've been very generous already with your time. A couple more questions. Mentioned it earlier about AI, and with technology really changing things dramatically in almost every aspect of business, what do you see in terms of changes coming as a result of that? And how are you guys evaluating different tools to focus on efficiency and profitability of the law firm? And I ask that because, of this shift that seems to be really starting to have momentum around looking at those things for personal injury firms that perhaps for a long time were just not part of the equation because it was viewed more as practice.
I think it's going to become a necessity. for all personal injury firms, especially if they're going to want to grow and scale. They're never going to replace people. I think that's the wrong mindset. I think some people are very afraid of that. I know some staff are afraid of that. We always tell them, because we implement a lot of tools and we try to stay cutting edge with our technology. This is never going to replace you. This is going to make you more efficient. It's going to give you more time to do the important aspects of your job. And so, at our firm, there are things, medical chronologies, that it used to be an attorney or a paralegal had to review every single medical record, the date, what happened to him. I mean, hours, sometimes days to put that together, that now you can utilize an AI tool and they can do it in minutes. Now you have to go back and check that and make sure, okay, is this, correct? And is it done? But it is making you so much more efficient that, now our employees can focus on what's the most important thing, which is client communication, taking care of the clients, making sure that they're doing what they need to do and that they understand what's going on with their case. And so, we've utilized AI and we've, sampled all different companies. I'm not going to say one in particular because there's a lot of good ones out there. But it's a tool that I think everyone is going to have to implement in their personal injury law firm if they're going to continue to function in this space.
Not asking you to name, but in terms of your tech stack, are you using case management software plus an AI overlay and then AI in specific areas that would be more administrative, repetitive tasks? I ask that because of people I've had on the podcast and others that I've talked to, it seems like perhaps there is a little less intentionality around that than should be, like in terms of mapping out, okay, how can we make sure that we implement things that take off our team administrative, tedious tasks, like being purely selfish, like identifying and verifying liens, for example, is something that law firms do every day. We've just launched a new solution that allows, a law firm to offload that to a technology with a human in the loop solution, because you kind of need that for sub-row specialty. But, thinking through those things in terms of your process, not just that, of course, but, like you said, medical chronologies, anything that's done repetitively, it seems like if you map that out and then look for solutions, that is what will ultimately propel you in terms of more efficient operations, better profitability, and better client experience, because the team has more time to spend with clients instead of sitting on hold with Medicare or trying to find the right person at Rawlings to talk to about an ERISA lien.
You're exactly right. And yet we have a case management software. And then on top of that, we have AI, and we actually have a couple of AI sources that we use depending on what we're doing. We have another AI that assists with setting up automated text messages or automated messages, so that, you're not having to do that repetitive thing there. We're currently looking at, and it hasn't got there yet where I'm comfortable, but there's some AI that they'll call and they'll open up the claims. And some of these claims, we have staff that just sit on the phone for an hour waiting to open up a claim. If you can get to the point where AI can do that and do it efficiently, I mean, that's going to save so much time for the staff that they could focus elsewhere, on the more important things. We use AI now where one of the companies we use, we do medical records requests. And if it doesn't get to us, we don't get the responses, AI follows up with them to check and see what's going on with this and to say, hey, 7 days, it's been 7 days, it's been 14 days, whatever it is. That used to be staff that had to follow up on getting medical records and bills all the time. And we have a time period. If the AI doesn't work, yeah, then you get a person in the loop that's overseeing it, to make that phone call if need be. But you're absolutely right. It's those repetitive things that's going to save them time. And we're looking at all of those and constantly demoing more, because I do believe there's going to be a lot of AI that will be able to handle those things even on the phone with other companies. Again, not with our clients, because I'm a firm believer with the size of our firm, that is something that will set us apart, is that you will have the human interaction with your clients. But outside of clients, I think AI can be a huge tool.
And that's precisely why we launched this solution. It was technology we'd actually built internally and then realized, hey, a law firm can deploy this, and instead of having their, people sitting on hold with Medicare and then following up, and then same thing with, the different recovery vendors, it's time that can be recaptured by the law firm to be deployed in ways that are more operationally sound and efficient for the law firm. So it is really going to be interesting to watch how this all unfolds and see where the future takes us in terms of those things. But in the end, really, it should all be better for the customer, the injured party, in terms of their experience. Because if it doesn't help that, then really it's not hitting the right goal in my mind anyway.
Absolutely. And that tool that you're talking about, that sounds amazing. That's exactly the type of thing AI should be used for.
Yeah, exactly. All right, last question. I always ask this, very open-ended, so I will let you answer it however you want. As a trial lawyer and someone who has founded and then scaled your own firm, what's your view?
My view is that I feel like I've been very blessed to be able to do what I do and love what I do. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that go to work every day and they're doing a job. I get to help people. I get to help people that have been injured, that have had something terrible happen to them. Their life's been thrown upside down. Their family's been impacted, and I get to try to make that better. And I get to do that with my best friend, with a firm, and I get to do it with an amazing group of people that we've been fortunate enough to hire and work with. And so my view is that I'm very blessed, and I want to be able to give back to the community, to show my appreciation for that.
Well, so if anybody has questions about anything that you talked about today, or has a case they need to refer to someone locally here in Orlando, what are your practice areas and a little bit about your firm?
Yeah, so we do personal injury and wrongful death, mostly car accidents, premises liability, tractor trailer crashes. And we have 7 attorneys here in the office. Zach, my partner, is board certified in civil trial law. And I've kind of practiced all over the country, tried cases in New Mexico, Colorado, here in Florida. And so we consider ourselves a true trial firm. We are going to prepare every case as if it's going to trial. And because of that, probably 99% of them end up reaching a fair resolution for our clients without going to trial.
And what's the best way to get in touch with you if someone's got a question or has a case to refer to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So the direct number for the office is 407-801-3000. My email is nnorden, and my last name's Norden, at Norden Leacox, Leacox.com. I always spell that out because for some reason, everyone can say Norden, but they say Leacox or Leacox. And I think my name's more difficult than Zach's, but
I get it. Well, for our listeners, I have worked with Nick and Zach and the other lawyers in their firm, and they're top notch. So definitely, if you've got something that you don't want to handle, that here in Orlando, they're a great firm to connect with. And Nick, thank you for your time today and for being on the podcast. And we'll see everyone on the next episode of Trial Law Review.
If today's episode gave you a new perspective on how your firm operates or sparked a useful idea, consider sharing it with a colleague and be sure to follow the show so you don't miss future conversations with leaders across the personal injury space. Trial Law Review is brought to you by Synergy, a strategic operations partner helping personal injury law firms resolve healthcare liens more efficiently. If you're looking to accelerate case flow and allow your team to focus on high-level legal work that moves cases faster, consider partnering with Synergy. I'm Jason Lazarus, and I'll see you in the next episode.